talking about the graffiti towers
Yeah.
downtown, which are 3 half-built skyscrapers that dozens of graffiti artists covered in tags from top to bottom a few months ago. And they've been stalled for 5 years because the Chinese developer ran out of money, and they put $1 billion into it. It would take another $1 billion to finish it. And they were, from what I remember, I think the developer expected them to be mostly like second properties for overseas investors. So they weren't even going to be lived in, most likely. A lot of them, they're
which is like
luxury condos,
next level gentrification.
yeah, right. You're priced out by a
non-entity.
Yeah. So I think that epitomizes this dilemma that a lot of cities are facing, where the drop off or the development of a balanced, rich ecosystem into one that's more of a monoculture, or more, more based on speculation and real estate, and it's
No, it's an interesting thing that happened. And that's another one of those things that just kind of blew up and ties into the street art. I wonder, I wonder how much. So I mean, Basquiat and Herring were kind of like the forefronts of this sort of movement to legitimize street art, right? I would say, like, especially like transitioning into gallery spaces and whatnot. Do you think that maybe the backlash towards like a Banksy is because it's been seen before, kind of thing? Or like I'm always interested in sort of that that relationship between street art versus gallery art, and like what gets elevated to that level, and what not.
I mean, it's the conflict between commodification and something that can't be or is intended to avoid being commodified. So like, the thing about the graffiti towers is interesting for me, because people are like, but is it good art? And I'm like, I don't even know if it matters in a way, like, the phenomenon is so much more meaningful than a critical analysis of it. And I mean, I think a lot of the pieces are really impressive and are like,
technically
good.
sound.
And I'm not a graffiti guy, so I'm not, but
you didn't start tagging
with my limited experience of graffiti and street art. I was pretty impressed.
Well, it also, one of the things that's interesting about that is almost like it's the object itself, like the object itself is the art object, right? Like the building itself becomes the structure, right? And so to be able to transform a structure like that of that scale into something that it is not intended for, I think that speaks to what you're saying of like, I think you're missing the point here. The point, it is a conceptual piece as well, right? Like it's not just graffiti on a building. It is a well coordinated effort through a community to sort of reclaim a building for strictly their aesthetic, their culture. I really, no, I think that is a really good example of sort of this like marrying, because it's one of those things that like maybe the art world, the big capital A, top of the financial ladder art world could never really do, right? But they're fascinated by that strictly because of that, right? A white cube space can't make that happen.
And it shouldn't. I mean, it's different intentions, different formats, different audiences. I mean, it's turning something that is representative of the failure of, high-end speculative capitalism to provide for everybody, for citizens, for, Angelinos who are terribly underhoused, for affordable housing at least, and turns it into something for everybody that you can see from like everywhere.
Yeah.
But again, like, artists got to get paid.
Yeah.
How do you monetize that, or how do you make that feasible? And so like Lee Quinones, graffiti artist who came up with Basquiat, has a show at Charlie James now.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me like how, like, so he's not showing just tags or pieces that he would do on the street or on subway cars or whatever. So there is like a somewhat of a transformation to making objects that can be sold, right? Mm-hmm. Which, like, more power to him.
Yeah.
But it's just, I find it interesting how those operate in different spheres and what we expect from artwork in different contexts and different places.
Yeah. You just reminded me of, what's his name? Shepard Fairey, and his turning his work into a clothing brand, which is maybe like the most commodifying turn that I've seen a graffiti artist do, right? Like, it almost kind of, I've talked to different people that have different opinions. I tend to think that it kind of makes the earlier work less impactful, but it's interesting how even my prejudices affect that perception, because I don't have a problem with Lee Quinones making the transition, or even what's it called, Banksy making that transition, but for some reason to make a brand like that just seems like it doesn't fit within the capital A art world. And I'm putting judgment on myself for feeling this way as I express it, but it is an interesting thing that, like, about perception that comes into these spaces, right?
Yeah,
like almost like he was making something for a more mass accessibility, and I'm judging him for it because he's not in a fine art space. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like those Andre the Giant stickers were all about.
I remember when they were coming out. Yeah.
There was such a like mystique about it because there was no internet, and you have to ask your friends and be like,
"What is this?
What the hell is this?"
Yeah,
like, oh, this guy made like 2,000 of them for his RISD thesis or whatever. But yeah, that's about accessibility and early meme culture, I guess, and spreading things all over the place, and clothing somewhat similar, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially like street wear.
Yeah.
That's like, identifies you as part of a tribe in a way.
Yeah, as a subculture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,